Jim Jones just snapped and the internet can't stop talking about it. After Tony Yayo threw shade at Jay-Z and fired shots at Jim himself, things spiraled fast. What started as a few comments on a podcast just turned into a full-blown rap civil war. Bleek's defending Jay, Yayo's defending 50, and Jim's losing his mind on air. Let's break down every wild second because this beef gets messier the deeper you look. All right, let's start from the top. How did this whole storm even start? Tony Yayo walks into that interview calm, confident, and ready to talk. But what came next flipped the entire industry upside down. In just a few sentences, he managed to shake the table from New York to LA. He didn't just throw shade, he threw fire. And once those words hit the internet, there was no taking them back. He started off casual, talking about loyalty and what it means to look out for your people. Then he hit the line that broke the internet. Jay-Z never helped his own. 50 Cent takes care of his crew better. The way he said it wasn't slick, it was direct. No filter, no hesitation. That single sentence started an avalanche of reactions. Fans immediately flooded comment sections. Some cheered, calling Yayo real for saying what others were afraid to. Others dragged him, saying he was disrespecting legends. The debate turned into a full-blown storm. One side calling out Jay for being cold, the other praising him for building empires instead of babysitting artists. Either way, Yayo had people talking, and just when you thought he might cool off, he doubled down. He compared how 50 Cent moves for his people versus how Jay moves for his. The implication was clear. One man builds leaders, the other builds dependents. That's the kind of statement that doesn't fade after a day. And in hip-hop, that echo always finds its way back. What Yayo didn't realize, though, his words weren't just echoing, they were landing straight in Memphis Bleek's backyard. And Bleek, he wasn't about to let that slide. Memphis Bleek didn't waste a single second letting that comment breathe. As soon as Yayo's clip hit the internet, Bleek clapped back with the energy of someone who's been waiting years to defend his brother. You could see the loyalty written all over his face. Jay-Z wasn't just a mentor to him, he was family. So when Yayo said Hav doesn't look out for his people, Bleek took that as a straight-up personal attack. He hopped on his own podcast and made his stance clear. Jay doesn't owe anyone anything. He's been putting people on for decades, but that doesn't mean he has to feed every single person forever. Bleek said, "I do my own tours. I feed myself." That line hit hard because it flipped the narrative. It wasn't about being taken care of, it was about independence. The internet immediately split again. Some fans said Bleek was just being protective, others said he sounded defensive. But to Bleek, this wasn't about clout or drama. Yeah, it was about pride. Jay-Z taught him how to fish, not how to beg. And in his eyes, that's what real loyalty looks like. Still, even with Bleek defending Hav, the conversation started to spiral. Every time Yayo's name came up, tension filled the room. What started as a lighthearted debate turned into a heated back and forth between camps. You could feel that something bigger was brewing because there was one more voice ready to jump in, and he wasn't coming to play nice. And that's when it happened. Jim Jones entered the conversation, and everything exploded. The second Jim Jones' name came up, the energy in the room changed. You could see it on his face that he wasn't there to sip water and talk quietly. The man came loaded. As soon as Tony Yayo's comments were mentioned, Jim leaned forward, eyes locked, voice rising. He didn't ease into it, he went straight to war. "Ain't nobody feeding me," he shouted. "I built this from the ground up." The tension hit instantly, and everyone in the room knew they were witnessing a moment. Jim wasn't just defending himself, he was defending his entire legacy. Years of work, respect, and grind were being questioned, and he wasn't about to let anyone rewrite that story. You could feel the pride in every word he spit out. To him, this wasn't just rap gossip, it was about honor. He made it clear he never needed a big brother figure to hand him anything. Every car, every chain, every dollar, earned. Period. And the more he talked, the more it felt like years of frustration were pouring out all at once. It wasn't just about Yayo or Bleek, it was about every time someone tried to minimize what he built. Jim wasn't just shouting for the cameras, he was unloading everything he'd held back. His tone wasn't defensive, it was defiant. He wanted everyone to know, He's not a 50s artist. He's not Jay's artist. He's Jim Jones. The room fell quiet for a moment, but you could tell the silence wasn't peace, it was a shock. Memphis Bleek tried to cool it down, laughing it off, trying to change topics. But Jim was locked in. He wasn't hearing anything but his own heartbeat and his own rage. The moment had turned from a casual podcast chat to a full-blown statement. And that's when it hit everyone. This wasn't just a reaction. This was years of built-up tension finally snapping. But what nobody knew yet was that this was only the beginning of the chaos to come. This beef didn't just appear out of nowhere, it's been simmering for years. Tony Yayo and Jay-Z have had quiet tension dating all the way back to the early 2000s. Yayo has never been afraid to call out Hav publicly, and that history has been sitting under the surface like a ticking bomb. When he mentioned Jay blocking 50 Cent from doing the Super Bowl halftime show, that wasn't just random shade, that was a scar reopening. And this time, everyone was watching. The thing is, Yayo's comments about loyalty didn't come from nowhere. He's seen how the industry treats people once the spotlight fades, and he's been vocal about artists who forget where they came from. In his mind, he wasn't dissing Jay, he was calling out what he saw as fake loyalty in hip-hop. But that kind of talk hits different when it's aimed at a giant like Hav. Especially when Hav's circle includes guys like Bleek, who take that loyalty personally. Now, the wild part? Jim Jones wasn't even the main target. But when Yayo brought up how people take care of their teams, Jim felt that shot indirectly. He's been through this before: Dipset versus G-Unit, old label tension, comparisons about who's really holding it down for their crew. It all came flooding back. Every time someone mentions loyalty, Jim's name somehow gets pulled into it, and he's sick of that narrative. So when Bleek and Yayo started throwing subtle shots on camera, Jim saw it as more than friendly debate. He saw it as history repeating itself. And once that switch flipped, there was no turning back. Every word, every comparison, every who feeds who line brought him closer to snapping. But the moment that truly sent this from rap talk to real pain, it wasn't about money or fame, it was about stack bundles. And when Yayo said that name, everything changed. When Tony Yayo mentioned stack bundles, the whole energy shifted. The joke stopped, the laughter died down, and you could practically feel the tension crawl through the mic. Yayo dropped one of the most brutal accusations the internet's heard in years, that Jim Jones left stack bundles in the hood to die. That one line cut deep, not just for Jim, but for anyone who knew the story. Stack wasn't just an artist to Jim, he was family, someone Jim helped bring up from the streets. Yayo framed it like Jim didn't look out for his own the way 50 looked out for G-Unit. He painted this picture of Stack struggling while Jim was living lavishly, and it hit people emotionally. The internet blew up with old photos, interviews, and theories, everyone trying to piece together the truth. To Yayo, it was about loyalty and responsibility to Jim. It was straight-up disrespect to the memory of a friend. The accusation reopened one of the most sensitive wounds in hip-hop. Stack Bundles' death still hurts the culture years later. He was talented, hungry, and right on the edge of superstardom, but the streets caught up before he could fully escape. To say Jim left him there wasn't just wrong, it was a dagger to the chest. Jim had already lived with that loss. Hearing it thrown in his face publicly, that was the last straw. Jim's reaction was instant. You could see the shift in his posture, the pain in his eyes. He didn't hear it as criticism. He heard it as blame. And if there's one thing Jim doesn't play about, it's the people he's lost. From that moment, the argument wasn't about rap or loyalty anymore. It was about legacy, respect, and the ghosts of the past that never stop haunting. And when Jim finally responded to that accusation, he didn't hold anything back. Not the emotion, not the pain, and definitely not the truth. Jim Jones leaned forward, voice cracking between anger and heartbreak, and set the record straight once and for all. He said he did everything he could for Stack Bundles, from giving him opportunities to trying to physically move him out of the hood. Jim revealed he had even gone house hunting, ready to buy Stack, and others a brownstone in New Jersey just to keep them safe. But Stack didn't want to leave. Jim said, I was trying to save my people, but you can't save someone who doesn't want to go." You could tell he was reliving it in real time. He talked about the tours, the flights, the private jets, the lifestyle he gave Stack and the team. "We were moving differently," he said. "Private jets, tall buses, hundreds of thousands on the weekend." He wasn't bragging, he was reminding everyone how much he did for the people around him. To Jim, the idea that he abandoned anyone, especially Stack, wasn't just false, it was disrespectful to everything he'd built and every life he'd touched. But what hit the hardest was the pain behind his words. This wasn't rap talk. This was grief resurfacing. Jim explained that he'd already lost too many people from the block, and Stack's death was one that never left him. "I tried," he said. "I did everything I could." He wasn't yelling for attention. He was pleading for people to understand that leadership doesn't mean control. You can offer a better life, but you can't make someone walk away from the streets. And when you look at it from Jim's side, that line hits hard. You can't save someone who won't leave the fire. It's a truth that runs deep in every hood. Loyalty and danger are often tied together. Jim was mourning while being accused of betrayal, and that combination is gasoline on fire. Still, even after all that, Jim didn't fold or play victim. He ended that rant with pride, making it clear that his people are still standing, still eating, and still loyal. But after that emotional explosion, there was no turning back. The internet had already chosen sides, and the chaos was only getting started. The second Jim finished defending himself, the entire vibe in the room flipped. The tension was thick enough to slice through. What started as a podcast suddenly felt like a live battleground. Jim was pacing, his voice booming through the mic, and Bleek tried to keep the peace, but it was already too late. The conversation had left discussion territory, and this was personal now. You could see Bleek trying to reel it back, laughing nervously, saying, "Come on, bro, chill." But Jim wasn't hearing it. He was in that zone where emotion takes the wheel. Jim turned his frustration straight at Tony Yayo. He started throwing heavy shots, calling him broke, clowning his look, even saying he needed help with hygiene. The internet would later clip those lines and replay them 1,000 times. He mocked Yayo for depending on 50 Cent, saying, "Tell your man 50 send you an ounce or something." The crowd in the room tried to keep it light, but the humor didn't land. It felt sharp. It felt real. Every jab was fueled by pride and pain. Jim wasn't just fighting Yayo, he was fighting years of people questioning his name, his business, and his loyalty. He started flexing hard, talking about his success, the cars, the money, the houses. "We lit. We take care of ourselves," he shouted. That line wasn't for Yayo, that was for anyone who'd ever doubted him. It was a declaration that he and his circle were self-made. Meanwhile, Bleek tried to cool the room, repeating, "We good, bro, we good." But you could tell he was tense too. Nobody wanted the cameras to catch a full-blown meltdown, but it was too late. The internet had already smelled blood. That raw emotion, the yelling, the insults was viral gold waiting to happen. Within hours, clips from the episode flooded every platform. And while everyone was still processing Jim's explosion, Tony Yayo was already planning his next move. But instead of talking back, he went silent. And that silence hit harder than words. Instead of jumping on another podcast or dropping a diss track, Tony Yayo played it quiet, but deadly. He didn't rant, he didn't yell, he didn't even mention Jim by name. He just posted one photo on Instagram. Jim Jones's longtime rival, Max B. No caption, no hashtags, no explanation. And that's what made it hit so hard. The internet instantly knew what he was saying without him saying a word. That single post was the calmest but coldest clapback possible. The second that photo went up, the internet erupted. Fans flooded the comments with fire emojis, laughing faces, and "oh nah, he didn't" reactions. Within minutes, blogs picked it up. Yayo reignites Jim Jones' beef with one post. The timing was perfect. Jim had just gone viral for snapping, and now Yayo was spinning that moment back on him without even breaking a sweat. It was checkmate without a move being made. What made it worse for Jim was the symbolism. Max B isn't just an old enemy, He's one of the most painful names tied to Jim's legacy. Their fallout back in the Dipset days still lingers, and seeing Yayo use that against him hit below the belt. It wasn't just a diss, it was psychological warfare. Jim had gone off emotion, but Yayo was playing chess. Fans were instantly split. Half said Yayo's move was genius. That's how you troll without talking. The other half said it was corny, accusing Yayo of using a tragic situation for clout. But one thing everyone agreed on? He got under Jim's skin. That post reopened a wound Jim had been trying to close for years, and you could tell from the silence that followed it worked. And just like that, the power shifted. Jim might have owned the mic, but Yayo owned the internet. And in 2025, that's where the real war gets won. The second Yayo dropped that Max B post, hip-hop Twitter turned into a war zone. Every timeline, every comment section is pure chaos. Fans were posting clips from Jim's rant side by side with Yayo's calm troll, trying to decide who really won the exchange. It was like watching two completely different eras of the game collide, one built on pride and presence, the other built on memes and strategy. And everyone had something to say. Team Jim was loud. They called him a real one for defending himself, saying he had every right to go off. "You don't come for a man's legacy," one fan wrote. They praised him for standing 10 toes down, reminding people that Jim's been in the game for decades, building from the ground up without a cosign. To them, his rage wasn't weakness, it was authenticity. But then came Team Yayo and they were relentless. They said Jim fell into the trap, that he let emotions ruin his cool. Yayo said one thing and Jim gave him a movie, someone tweeted. They saw Yayo as the master of mind games, saying more with one photo than Jim did in a 10-minute meltdown. And they weren't wrong. Yayo's calmness turned into control. Then came the neutral fans, the ones who didn't care about the beef but couldn't look away. They called it the best entertainment of the month. Memes flooded TikTok, clips of Jim yelling mixed with Yayo's post and hilarious edits. It became more than a feud, it was a cultural moment. Hip-hop drama, pride, and legacy all rolled into one digital wildfire. But once the smoke started clearing, something deeper began to emerge. Beneath the jokes and memes, fans started asking the real question. What does loyalty really mean in this industry? When all the yelling, posts, and interviews settled, something bigger came into focus. This wasn't just about Jim Jones and Tony Yayo. It was about what loyalty really looks like in hip-hop. Yayo's message, even if messy, hit a nerve. Artists talk about brotherhood, but when the fame fades, who's really standing beside you? He wasn't just calling out Jim or Jay, he was calling out an entire culture that confuses friendship with financial support. Jim's reaction, though explosive, came from a real place too. He's carried his people for decades, and every time someone questions that, it reopens old wounds. To him, loyalty isn't about how much money you give. It's about respect, consistency, and showing up when it counts. So when Yayo framed the conversation like who feeds who, Jim heard that as an attack on everything he's built. That's why it cut so deep, and that's the core truth behind all this noise. Pride and pain often look the same. Yayo felt overlooked, Jim felt disrespected, and both spoke from scars they've earned over years in the game. This beef didn't start online, it started in how hip-hop measures loyalty, by money, fame, and proximity to power. And that measurement has been breaking bonds for decades. In the end, there are no winners here, just two men protecting their names and the legacies they've fought to build. Jim proved he'll never let anyone rewrite his story. And Yayo showed that even quiet shots can make loud noises. It's not about who's richer or louder, it's about who stands on what they say. And both of them? They stood tall. But the bigger question still hangs in the air. In a game built on loyalty and ego, who's really got whose back when the cameras stop rolling? And there you have it. Jim Jones versus Tony Yayo, a clash that started with words and exploded into one of the most talked about moments in hip-hop this year. What began as a few comments turned into a conversation about loyalty, legacy, and who's really standing beside who when the lights go out. No matter which side you're on, one thing's for sure, and both men made their message loud and clear. So now it's your turn. Whose side are you on? Is Tony Yayo exposing real truths about loyalty in the industry, or was Jim Jones right to defend his name and his people with fire? Drop your thoughts below because this story isn't done yet. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you want more breakdowns just like this. We've got more drama, more history, and more deep dives coming every week. Hit that bell so you never miss an update, and remember, in hip-hop, loyalty is everything.